The dark psychology of sexual validation. Speech, we like to believe desire is empowering. That being wanted automatically means we are valuable. But beneath the confidence, the glow, the attention, there's a quieter psychological truth we rarely talk about. Sexual validation can feel like power while secretly creating dependence. Sexual validation works because it hits the brain fast and deep. It tells us we are desirable, chosen, seen. In moments of insecurity, that feeling can become addictive, not because of sex itself, but because validation temporarily silences self-doubt. And the mind learns quickly. Attention equals worth. The darker side begins when validation replaces self-identity. When being desired becomes proof of value, absence of desire starts to feel like rejection. People may chase attention, not pleasure. Approval, not intimacy. What looks like confidence can actually be a fragile self-esteem, constantly ask others to confirm it. Psychologically, this creates a power imbalance. When your worth depends on how much someone wants you, you give them emotional control. Desire becomes currency. Attention becomes leverage. And slowly, boundaries blur not because someone forces them to, but because validation feels too good to lose. This is where intimacy often collapses. Real connection requires vulnerability, slowness, and emotional presence. Sexual validation is faster, easier, more measurable, but it doesn't ask who you are, only how you're perceived. Over time, this disconnect can leave people feeling desired yet unseen. The most dangerous illusion is mistaking validation for liberation. True freedom isn't being wanted by everyone, it's wanting yourself without needing an audience. When validation is internal, desire becomes a choice, not a survival strategy. Understanding the psychology behind sexual validation doesn't mean rejecting desire. It means reclaiming it, turning attention from proof into preference, from performance into presence. That's where real power lies. 5 key points of the speech. Sexual validation activates self-worth quickly, making it psychologically addictive. Chasing desire can replace identity and create emotional dependence. Validation-based desire often creates hidden power imbalances. Being desired is not the same as being emotionally seen. True confidence comes from internal validation, not external. Attention. The dark psychology of sexual validation. There's a quiet belief many of us carry without ever saying it out loud. If I'm desired, I must be valuable, not respected, not understood, not loved, desired. And in a world driven by attention, attraction has become one of the fastest ways to feel worthy. Sexual validation feels powerful because it works instantly. A look, a message, a reaction, a compliment. The brain releases dopamine, and suddenly insecurity goes silent. For a moment, the question, am I enough, disappears, but psychology asks a deeper question. What happens when validation becomes the source of identity instead of a reflection of it? This is where the dark side begins. Sexual validation is not inherently harmful. Desire is human. Wanting to be wanted is natural. The danger appears when validation replaces self-worth rather than adding to it. When attraction becomes the mirror you use to decide who you are, the brain doesn't distinguish between emotional survival and emotional reward. When validation reduces anxiety, it learns to seek it again and again and again. What begins as enjoyment slowly turns into dependence. You stop asking, what do I want? And start asking, do they want me? This subtle shift changes everything. People often believe sexual confidence comes from freedom, but psychology shows that compulsive validation often comes from insecurity wearing confidence as a costume. The more uncertain someone feels internally, the louder the need for external confirmation becomes, and because sexual attention is measurable, likes, messages, reactions, invitations, it becomes an easy scoreboard for worth, but there is a cost. When validation becomes the goal, intimacy becomes secondary. Emotional depth requires time, boundaries, and uncertainty. Validation is immediate. It doesn't ask for vulnerability, only presentation. This is why many people feel desired but not known. They receive attention but lack connection. They feel attractive but emotionally empty. The brain mistakes attention for attachment, and this creates power imbalance. When your self-worth depends on someone's desire, that person holds emotional leverage, even if they never ask for it. You may tolerate discomfort, ignore boundaries, or silence your needs because losing validation feels worse than losing self-respect. This is not manipulation. It's psychology. People don't give power away intentionally. They trade it for relief. Sexual validation can also distort how relationships form. Desire becomes the entry point instead of emotional compatibility. Chemistry replaces safety, intensity replaces trust, and when the attention fades as it naturally does, the foundation collapses. This is why some connections burn bright but die fast. They were fueled by validation, not intimacy. Another psychological trap is performance. When validation is the reward, authenticity feels risky. People start curating versions of themselves that attract attention rather than expressing who they actually are. Desire becomes something to maintain, not something to experience, and living as a performance is exhausting. The most dangerous illusion is believing validation equals empowerment. True power is not being wanted by everyone. It's not needing to be wanted to feel whole, internal. Validation changes everything. When self-worth comes from within, desire becomes optional. Attention becomes a bonus, not a requirement. Attraction turns into choice instead of currency. This is where intimacy finally becomes possible, because real connection requires something validation cannot provide. Being seen without performing, understanding the dark psychology of sexual validation isn't about rejecting desire. It's about reclaiming it, letting attraction be expression, not proof. Letting connection matter more than reaction. The moment you stop needing validation to feel valuable is the moment desire stops controlling you. And that, psychologically, is real freedom.